My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc., but my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings, and they co-signed for her house so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail, because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12,000 for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons when my parents took them to Disney World. He didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking, cause it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas, and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. I was a kid and my sister was much older when my parents were finally done with her. From my recollection, she went through the cycle of making one stupid decision after another, even when they would tell her and show her why she shouldn't make that decision. Dropped out of college, they were paying for, and used the tuition money she was refunded to buy a Firebird, then quit her job. Let car run out of oil, kept driving it until the engine seized up. Parents bailed her out again, buying her what they could afford on one salary, a decent, used station wagon. Only catch, she'd take the job my dad called in favors for. Parents come home one day to find strange car in driveway, a Sunbird. It was old and rusty, but it was a one-to-one trade my sister managed to swing on the station wagon. Lo and behold, old and rusty car breaks down almost immediately and she simply stops showing up to work, gets fired. Moves out with no car and no job, accusing parents of controlling her life. Moves back in 3 months later. Upset that I have moved into her old bedroom, which is bigger, demands to be moved back into the bigger bedroom. Parents say no, she threatens to move out. She goes on a semi-hunger strike about the bedroom. Turns out she was shoplifting and stockpiling candy to eat so she wouldn't have to eat with the rest of the family. During this time, dates a number of less than stellar boyfriends, including a guy who is 30 years older, but drives a Porsche, a guy who had been convicted of sexual abuse, and another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night. Eventually, she is told to pay rent, go to college, or move out. She chooses to move out, and is gone by the end of the week. I clearly remember her threatening to burn the house down as she left. 2 months later, she asks to move back in because her roommate and best friend kicked her out. Parents say no, she's on her own unless she wants to go to college or get a job and keep it. Car breaks down again, for good, and calls and asks parents if they can buy a new one for her. Not new as in new to her. New as in brand new model year. My parents' newest car was 15 years old at the time. They say no, and not to call again. There were a whole raft of other things too, including forgetting to pick up her grandmother from doctor's appointments, generally loathing the existence of the rest of her family. And, then, ironically, deriding the family as rednecks when she finally managed to hook a guy who was a small business owner and actually had some money. Anywho, it's been about 20 years since I've spoken to her, and, from the stuff I hear now and again through the pipeline, I'm better for it. I do expect her to come calling when my parents pass and she finds out I'm the sole heir. My ex-wife disowned my son. We both married young when I was in the military, high school sweethearts. She became pregnant 6 months into our marriage. I don't think she connected with him at all after he was born. The most she did with him was Instagram photo shoots where she painted herself as #1 mommy. When he turned 3, I left the military. A year after that, she ran for the hills. I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat down with her at a local restaurant to talk divorce plans. We split all of our financials and material items down the middle. We finally got to custody for my kiddo, something I dreaded to discuss because fathers never gain custody in my area, and she tells me I want absolutely no responsibility. I was taken back and I asked if she was sure. She was. That one sentence hurt me more than anything else that happened during that time. My biological father wanted nothing to do with me, and now I was seeing it happen with my own child but with his mother. I received full custody and she married within a year afterwards. She had another child too. Her parents try their best to be a part of his life, but she still does her best to avoid him. He's 7 now and used to it, but I know it weighs heavily on him. It sucks, but it's life, I guess. Not my kid, but my sister I raised for several years. I was a senior in high school when my parents had my sister, completely unexpected. They were 58 and 55. I never really got to know her much as I went away to college when she was 5 months old, and was in the Air Force by the time she was 1.5. I saw her twice on leave, and got pics, but the way life was working out we never really got time together. Fast forward, our dad dies when she is 2, and our stepmother is raising her. She was a terrible parent, like the kind that saw one of her kids run away at 16 to halfway across the country, another run away at 15 and get married, and one that is just a loon who spent his life bouncing around whatever hot MLM program was out there as a career. She also convinced my dad to send me to a pray away the gay camp in TN. When I was 15. So when my sister was 11 and begging for help, I took leave and went to her. Surprisingly, our stepmonster was happy to get attorneys to draw up the paperwork for me to become my sister's guardian, and even pay for it. So I'm raising my sister and things are okay until she is about 14. Then I caught her doing these videos online talking dirty, trying to get guys to jerk off. So that was a mess of trying to get those down and suing the people that hired her to do them. Ran away for a week, hiding out at a friend's house, found her when she was caught shoplifting. ABD charge at 14, trying to steal the phone of a boy she was dating to say if he was talking to other girls. It happened on base and I managed to talk it out of being a bigger thing. A second B&E charge with friends breaking into the NCO club to try to steal beer. I was told I had to leave base housing at that point. My security clearance was suspended to make sure she wasn't putting me in a position I could be compromised. Still 14. Arrested with a stolen military ID trying to get into a bar. 15 escapes rehab. 15 escapes rehab again. 16 things seem good and she is taking school seriously. At 18 she was accepted to RISD, graduated with honors, and had an actual decent paying job with a web company with benefits and everything. Started getting stoned a lot, lost her job. Sold her car to pay bills. Lost her apartment, still hadn't bothered looking for work. Got her trust fund at 24, blew over $400,000 in 2 years, nothing to show for it. Had multiple cases against her for drugs. Was restricted to the state, but decided to go follow fish around anyway and sell Molly. Got picked up for hooking and possession out of state, was returned to where she was detained and somehow released pending trial yet again. While awaiting trial she was caught holding enough packaged for sale heroin to qualify as a distribution charge. By then, I hadn't heard from her for almost 7 years, and only managed to keep up with her reading the police blotter from the occasional attorney that she had contacted me to verify I would pick up her legal tab. I wouldn't. Against any logic, she was out of prison in under 3 years. I heard she dimmed a bunch of people out to make it happen. She showed up at my house, asking for a place to stay. I said I couldn't have her in my house, but I'd get her a place for the night and then help her locate a place of her own. That night she broke into my house, nearly got shot by me while doing it, and tried to spin some story that she was looking for something she dropped in my house earlier that day, despite never actually entering my house. I told her she had to go. She threatened she would call DCFS and tell them I was abusing my kids if I didn't go with her to an ATM and give her all the money I could withdraw. Told her to get the hell out before I exercised the castle defense law and dropped her. Took out a restraining order the next day, and in doing so found she once again left state when she wasn't supposed to have and violated her parole, so back to the clink. Since then she's been dead to me. Disowned my stepbrother because he ended up being caught in a pedo sting. He was caught in a giant sting, and was charged for having kiddie porn as well as breaking into teen girls' emails to find lewd pictures, to blackmail them into having sex with him. He was 21 when he was caught. The most messed up part was that a couple years before he was caught he had broken into my email and done the same thing, tried to blackmail me into giving him more pictures. I was able to get him to keep his mouth shut because the pictures he found of me were from me when I was 15, and I threatened to go to the cops to charge him with child pornography. That shut him up real quick, probably because he knew they'd find whatever else he was hiding. I wish I had gone to the cops, because maybe I could have prevented him from harming those other girls. But I honestly had no idea about the extent of it. I thought he was just being a supreme creep to me personally. The SWAT team ended up raiding our house, waking up my dad with guns in his face and forcing him to sit outside in his boxers while they searched. My brother is serving 18 years. He tried to send me a few letters, with some BS apology. I told him to leave me the hell alone and haven't talked to him since. My family disowned me because I disowned my mother. I was sexually groomed, abused and tortured by her husband for years, and when I finally told her, she not only didn't believe me, but stayed married to him for 7 years. I had to move out at 16 to get away from how I was being treated. Then when I finally began speaking to others, she started to cover her butt with her social circle by telling them that I seduced her husband. I cut her off for years, and didn't ever want to see her again, but my family bullied me to just get over it and have a relationship with my mother, and that I was hurting her. Even my sister, who knew what happened, knew I stayed for so long to protect her, fell into a trap of my mother whining to everyone around her and painting me as a liar. About 4 years ago, she was very suddenly diagnosed with advanced cancer and didn't have much time. I was moving out of my home state and everyone told me I needed to see her before I left, that I needed to be there, but I didn't want to. In the end, everyone turned their back on me. They were so mad I wouldn't just forget my trauma just to say goodbye to someone I hadn't loved for a long time, and rightly so. My mother and her sister were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye. So the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges, because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's real tough to find love for him. He's almost 14, next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughters several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He's run away from school, run away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house, after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We have become that family in our town where the police are called to our home on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside the walls. A lot of what has occurred he had little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself, structure versus chaos, and my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can, while keeping ourselves and our daughters safe, but I'm tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him, and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while. But my wife refuses to let him go, so we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. I've disowned one of my siblings, still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She is much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everybody in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put our mother through are truly horrible. I wouldn't care if she disappeared forever. I am not sure if this counts. I didn't disown him, but I went through a dissociative episode after some really intense trauma, and I honestly couldn't feel any attachment and parental love that I had for my son. I tried not to show it, and behave as normally as possible because he was a child at the time and couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. It was pretty disturbing to not be able to feel any sense of bond with him. I eventually got better, but I definitely did not feel what I or most people would call love for him. My mother was disowned by her parents for her interracial relationship. We are from the South, Arkansas. There are parts of this that are weird too. My mother initially lied to her parents and said she was dating an Arab man. This was fine, but they found out she was lying, leading to her being disowned. I guess in the early 70s Arabs were okay but blacks were no-nos. They disowned my mom, but it was fine if we came over. My older sister was close with them, But me and my younger sister always felt weird going over there. They adored my older sister though, and she stayed over and went on vacation with them among other things. I remember asking my grandfather why he didn't like my mother when I was about 8 or 9 years old at a cousin's birthday party. He just walked away. These same people who essentially pushed her out of their lives were the same ones she took care of and comforted in their darkest times. She sort of went back to them and they didn't push her away for what I am assuming is they knew the end was near and they were trying to right their wrongs. I have no idea, just an assumption. She was there with them until their ends though. My mom might not be perfect, but damn, that made me look at her in a completely different light. I have 4 grown children. One of my children, I'll call her Amber, has mental health problems. I would say that her behavior makes it very difficult to love her. Her siblings want nothing to do with her. But Amber thinks she is perfectly sane and everyone else in the family is crazy and evil. She also thinks she is superior to us all and will one day be rich and famous. She is currently on welfare. No one else in the family has ever been on welfare. The other day she came over to our house. She sat down and spent about 30 minutes telling us that we had starved and abused her when she was a child. Not true. That we are horrible people. She claims that her father sexually abused her. Not true. She told me, I'm her mother, that I am a pedophile because I blew a kiss to my 3-year-old grandchild. Amber has 3 children and claims we have sexually abused them. Not true. We love these 3 girls very much, but currently Amber will not let us see them and is probably telling them bad things about us. It is heartbreaking. After Amber had yelled at us for a while, she told us that if we don't confess to the abuse we have done, then we can have no contact with her or her children. On her way out, she grabbed a bottle of our scotch and said it was not fair that we had a bunch of expensive scotch when she didn't. My husband collects different types of scotch and drinks it very moderately. She took the scotch. During this visit we noticed that Amber has lost a lot of weight and looks almost anorexic. Amber also accused her husband of being a pedophile, and forced him to confessing to having thoughts of pedophilia. Because Amber is involved with social services, they found out about Amber's accusations and her husband was unable to be alone with his kids for about a year, until he convinced them he was not a pedophile. Amber has been hospitalized once for mental problems, but never got diagnosed. Her children were put in a foster home for 3 months because she was physically attacking her husband, hitting, scratching, etc. in front of the kids. We were able to get the kids back, but it took a $5,000 legal bill in 3 months. There is so much more craziness. She has currently started having a relationship with a man who lives near her. By the way, her husband is still with her. Apparently the man from down the street is also staying with them and the kids. We are just praying she is using birth control. She seems to get especially crazy after having a baby, though her youngest is currently 2. She also asserts that both my husband and I were sexually abused by our fathers. Not true. She claims there is a family curse. She seems to really believe this. She sent us a text message last night reiterating the no contact unless we confess. At this point we are quite relieved that she wants no contact. Her disgusting accusations have cast a pall over our love for her, and even our love for her children. We feel we need to withdraw from her family completely to avoid any more pain. But we would be there to help our grandkids in a heartbeat if there was an opportunity. My older brother is the disowned child. He has been a petty crook as long as I could remember, into hard drugs since his pre-teens, and pretty much a full-blown sociopath. He treated every girl in his life like meat. I remember him as a teenager calling his girlfriend a slut because she didn't want to blow him. When he knocked some chick up years later, he had a daughter. And one of the first things out of his mouth in the hospital after her birth was she's gonna grow up to be a whore like her mom. Let's just say the child is better off not having him as a father figure. She's been adopted since then and is living a happy childhood last time I checked. He treated my parents like trash. He would be in and out of jail and they would take him in whenever he was out. Then he'd find a job, lose it, and go back to jail. Rinse and repeat. He would get in physical fights with my mom, dad, me. He'd kick our dogs, cats, etc. We'd have to get new drywall to replace the holes he punched through those walls. He'd have freakouts and smash things all around the house. Living with him was a nightmare. The last straw was him walking out on his kid and her mother, and starting a gang fight at our house over a drug deal gone wrong. Things got really violent and I'm pretty sure weapons were involved. He left the house, and on that very same night, he came back because he needed a place to stay. When my dad said no, he started fighting my dad. I stepped in at that point and almost beat the hell out of him. No one messes with my dad, no one. It ended with my dad having to hold me down to stop me from killing him, and my brother walking away down the street yelling obscenities. Haven't seen him since. This was 6 years ago. At this point, he's either in jail or dead. I may have every reason in the world to hate him for everything he's done, but I don't. He's a tortured soul who has let his demons get the absolute best of him, plain and simple. I just hope that he finds some kind of peace, even if it takes death for him to do so. Bill, if you're reading this, you're my brother and I still love you, and I hope you're okay, wherever you are. A little different, I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done, not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. But it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After I was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again, and now we're really close. I am forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life. My biological father divorced my mom and also has 3 kids, basically bouncing out of our lives and making it clear he wanted next to nothing to do with any of us when he left. Man, years later, at my older sister's funeral, that he had the gall to attend, I asked him why he did that. He said, "I thought it would be easier for everyone." He actually meant it was easier for him to run home to his wealthy family and enjoy a second adolescence while my single mother worked 2 jobs to feed 3 kids under 10 with 0 child support from him. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new girlfriend and her family to look after apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mom passed away when I was 14, my brother, grandmother, him and I met up to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered, and he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child. Just so that my brother, 22-year-old with a wife and 2 young children already struggling on 1 paycheck, couldn't seek child support. Needless to say, it stung, coming only days after my mother's funeral. As Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents disowned my siblings and I several times since I was in my late teens. One of the Jehovah rules is that you do not associate with others who know the truth but refuse to follow it, including family, and parents are encouraged to disown any children who have left the religion. The first time was when I was 19. It upset me, I was heartbroken, and eventually they changed their minds only to do it again a couple years later, and so on, until I stopped caring and no longer attempt to be a part of their lives at all. Not a parent, but my parents stopped loving me the moment I was disfellowshipped as a Jehovah Witness, and I was promptly kicked out. I knew nothing of how to live on my own at the time, but I had a decent job and survived. My brother stopped associating with them 2 years later and lives with me, and they since moved away, 1,500 miles away to be exact. It's easier to tell people I am orphan or that I do not have parents, cause it's hard to explain how they would stop loving or want to associate with their own son over some stupid cult rules. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brother, and then my mother got pregnant with me and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think I realized that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapable of loving anyone, including themselves.